Welcome back, everyone, to the second episode of the Leadership Ignition podcast. Again, brought to you by the Leadership Ignition team, where faith, family, fitness, and finance unite to help you level up your life. I'm Shane Beckham.
And I'm Mike Hough. We're both owners and coaches with the Leadership Ignition team, and we are ready to get lit, one F-bomb at a time. Shane, you want to introduce the topic this week?
I do. So this week, again, we got the stage last episode talking a little bit about what we were going to get into. And this week's episode is about controlling your emotions and how important that is for not just your work, but your family, your influences outside. You could even be at the grocery store. Like, we see all these things where people's letting emotions kind of get away from them in today's society. So we want to talk a little bit about how we handle our red zones, our green zones, and our blue zones. And when you break that down, Mike, I personally feel like if you can master the green zone, like if you can become a master of that green zone, which is, we're going to call that the safe zone. That is the goal state of what we want to be in. If we're talking about red, and then you got the blue zone, which is another little anomaly. But if we can master it and stay in that goal state, that, sir, is where the discipline of life lives. When you are in that green zone, you are impacting yourself, the others around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues. You're reacting rationally. You're behaving normal. You're in zone, right? You're fine. So you're making calm, clear, and logical decisions when you're in the green, which is where you want to effectively be when you're in a state of decision making, which we'll get in a little bit deeper on down the road here. But that's what we want to be. So I know I have mine. But, before we talk a lot about getting into what we use to stay in the green, maybe you can kind of give me a little bit more insight on how you feel about, just the emotions themselves and staying in that green zone, or what that green means to you.
Yeah, man, I'm just going to back up a second, because one of the things I want to do is paint an outline of what this looks like if you're going to imagine drawing it on a piece of paper, right? So imagine a green line that's right across the middle of that sheet of paper. And above that, 2 inches higher, is a red line, parallel to that green line, and 2 inches below that is a blue line, parallel to that green line, 2 inches below the green line, right? So now you've got a red line, a green line, a blue line. The idea is how do you stay in the green? You're not touching red, you're not going over red, you're not touching blue, you're not going below blue. And when you do, how do you get back there as fast as possible? So, you said a word, normal. What is normal? It's funny, I've always talked about this, and I've had this casual title for a book in my head called In Search of Normal, because you see crazy stuff go on all the time from people.
Of that.
I've probably a stack of notes this big of things I've observed that I would consider not normal. Now, a lot of people that just live in the blue consider that normal. And a lot of people that just live in the red consider that normal. It's not normal. What's normal is being able to control your emotions, whether they be depressive or excited, and trying to stay even keeled and without emotion. And not that you don't have emotions. You don't make decisions, or you don't react emotionally to situations. You recognize your emotion, you control it, and you behave normally. To me, that's what staying in the green is, Shane.
So before I get into some of mine, while you're on that point, that was a great illustration of how you laid that out, is how do you stay in the green? That's really the topic of what we want to focus on with this conversation. So appreciate that. But how do you collectively, stay in the green? What is some simple things? I know we may revisit this later in this episode, but what's just a couple of quick things that you do to make sure that you're staying congruent to that?
Well, I will admit that I'm probably blessed with a lower basal metabolic resting pulse than most people. So that's part of it, is I just start kind of lower to begin with. And then the other thing is I constantly evaluate. My job is a leader in all walks of life, at home, certainly at work, amongst my friends. We're all leaders. Leadership, another thing that we'll learn from Mac. We've got a lot of authors say the same thing. Leadership is simply nothing more than influence, and how you exert that influence, positively or negatively. You're always leading somebody somewhere. And I'm just cognizant. I've taught myself to be cognizant that I'm always in a leadership position, and that you're always casting a shadow of some type or another. And so for me, as I start to sense myself moving one way or the other, I make myself aware that what I do next matters to those around me, not just to me. If it was just me crashing around the world, it wouldn't matter. It's when I have ownership and responsibility for the people around me Then I realized that action isn't going to help them see me as a leader, and so I'll lose credibility. And once you lose that credibility, you're kind of useless, right? Most people don't want to follow you.
To that point, Mike, you talk about the three things that you want most people to have about you that's on your team, even in your family: know, like, and trust, right? Those are very intangible ingredients that you need to be successful in life,
You
not
can,
just at your job, just in
yeah.
life in general.
And in some places, you can even do without like. I mean, it's critically important for most things, but you first need people to know you. You want them to like you because it makes it easier to gain their trust. And that's kind of what you're saying. But once you've gained trust, man, so hard to gain, so easy to lose. And that
Very
happens
true.
to be in the blue and the red.
Great way to put that. I talk in the gym all the time about, hey, be somebody's lighthouse.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
You can't be a lighthouse if you're not in the green, because, I mean, you can, but you're going to be the wrong lighthouse. There's all kinds of examples of people out there that are not living in the green, that are lighthouses to others. And that's dangerous, when you fall into those traps. And to me, unfortunately, I can find myself teeter-tottering off that green more than I want to. And to your point, it only takes once. I try to tell my kids, or even people that I'm around, once it's out of your mouth, once those words exit your mouth, you can never unsay it, ever.
Doesn't matter how much you apologize.
It lives in somebody's head for the rest of their lives. And one sentence can derail somebody. I won't bring up a personal thing because I know it would embarrass them, but I have someone very close to me that was told something, and it bothers them. Like, they brought it up to me today. And this happened years ago. One sentence. And I'm like, man, the power of words and the way they can affect us as humans is just, it's remarkable to me, because it just stays there. It's unsaid. So living in that green, staying congruent to who you want to be, being that lighthouse for someone else. Some of the things that I do is, and I talk a lot about this to you and others, is breath work, is finding that inner peace. And I never thought that I could correlate something like that to
You are
staying in
not a
the
guy
green.
who thought would be sitting on a yoga mat breathing deeply.
It's just when I start feeling myself getting a little bit reckless or out of control, you take that good deep breath and it triggers that memory. Okay, this is not where I need to be. But with that said, what happens, Mike, to me is I'll be in the green, like me and you're having great. And fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which emotion or which word I would choose to say about my emotional state. I can go from the happiest green there is to volcano eruption red in about 1 second. And it is very impulsive, very aggressive, and very hard to control when you have that kind of impulse. Had it my whole life.
But I would say, Shane, I also see you successfully move out of that red back into the green just as quickly.
Well, there's
That's the flip side of that, I guess.
yeah, my wife says there's something wrong with me, which there probably is. I'm not medically diagnosed with anything, by the way, but there is probably something moderately wrong with me. I'll agree with that. But I want to be able to not go into the red as much. I want to be able to.
But we call that red, the explosive / fight mode for that very reason, right? It's dangerous.
And I jump from green to red so fast. Energy shift. I feel myself tense up. My breath goes shallow. All the things that I'm training myself not to do immediately starts to happen. Now I have two choices. It's explode and then I'm done, or step away, take that deep breath, realize that I'm about to do something that I'm very much so going to regret, and trying to stay out of that red. There is times you need to move into the red to protect others that are close to you. You may need to go there, but that's an anomaly. Those are rare situations. This is just everyday life when a colleague may come up and say something to you, a worker or somebody that works for you, and you just got to really, okay, I can get through this. So how often do you see yourself moving from that green to the red? Like, I know, it's not a perfect science, but what's your typical revolution look like there?
I get frustrated in particular at work. I'll use that as an example. When I see people who just aren't trying that hard, or just they know better and they don't do it anyway, or people who treat other people poorly. Those things really, they'll get me. in particular, right? So think about our team members. The vast majority of our team members are entry level people who are trying to generate income to feed their families. And then we screw up somebody's payroll, and it's like, yeah, we'll get you next cycle. Like, are you kidding me? No, you'll get them now, right? Those are kinds of things that really get me in the red. And so that probably happens 10 times a week, more than it should. I'll tell you, when I was younger, back when the testosterone was flowing, I was one of those guys that thought I was the smartest guy in the room. Everyone else around me was a bunch of idiots, and I would let people know, man. I would just say it because people would frustrate me. And, a couple of phrases along the way, but one that I stick to the most is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? I
Love
love
that.
that. I use it all the time. I teach other people that phrase, and it means the world to me because if you just want to be right, you're going to stay in the red. If you want to be effective, that brings you to the green because you're trying to solve a problem versus just prove yourself right. And one other thing that you said that I think is critically important is sometimes you have to go in the red. Yeah, but it should be intentional. It should be conscious. It should not be because you've lost your control.
Very good point. And we as a society now, not everybody, vast majority of it, say that's bad. That's masculinity.
Mm,
That's not something that you need to be doing ever. Well, I totally disagree with that. I was
totally
brought
disagree.
up differently than that. And, it's just like you said, there's a time, but there's an intentionality about that to where, if you cross these boundaries with me or my family, there's going to be a consequence for you to pay. Now, I may eventually have to also pay for that consequence, but, there's going to be, I am the protector of my family.
That's right.
Me as the man of that house, I should be able to protect every human that belongs to me. And you know what I mean in that context. Additionally, your coworkers, your colleagues, you look at the world through that lens and say, I will protect these people all that I can. So being intentional in the red is completely different than losing your cool. That was an excellent point because, again, our kids are not being taught that.
No, they're not.
They are being taught that that is a bad behavior. What happens to kids like me that can never express that? Eventually, something's going to give, man.
Good, I can tell you that
I
much.
promise you something's going to give, and it can lead down to some dark holes because you want to drown that out. And that's another episode. But I have to drown that noise out sometimes, or I used to think I had to. Well, how do you do that? You self-medicate. You drink. Drinking then what opens gateways of doors to further bad decisions, which eventually can take you into the red way farther than you would have ever gotten if you would have just thought things through. So, excellent point on having to intentionally get there. I think that's a great point for people to understand that it has to be intentional. So, one of the last points I'll make about going into the red is something that I've tried to do better is you have to train your awareness. Treat it like a rep in a gym. And if you train your awareness, you're going to know what your threshold is. Meaning, I intentionally do not put myself in certain situations to where I know that it is a high chance I will go into the red. I've had to remove that from my life. And I feel like that's sometimes what people are unwilling to do because the comfort zone can be toxic. They live in the red because that's all they know. They don't know how to get out of the red because they've lived in the damn red their whole lives. Perfect example. My second marriage, gasoline and fire, brother.
Yeah.
We woke up in the red and went to bed in the red. And you talk about a miserable life for both of us.
Everybody involved.
It was just not good. And I don't condone any, try to work through your stuff. But when you live in that zone of emotion for so long, it becomes who you are. And I mean, when I got with Les, she's like, you're broken. You don't know how to function without somebody yelling at you. You don't know how to function without chaos, without getting angry. And she was exactly right. And you don't realize that when you're living in those zones. It's just normal to you. So being able to have somebody shake you out of that zone is almost as important to understanding that, and you start realizing where your thresholds are at. So just some side nuggets there of how that can shake down because I've lived it. Not cool. Not cool.
Well, I'll say one more thing about the red, and then we should talk about the converse of that. But it's interesting watching young people. I won't name the relation to my family, but the young person in my family, it's probably young people, a lot of people's families, that you take away a device for them not fulfilling a chore obligation or something else, right? And it's like, hey, give me that iPhone, give me your iPad, you're gonna lose it for 8 hours. For the first 3 hours, they are in the mega red. Everything's aggressive, everything's upsetting them. They're angry, right? And they were probably in the red to begin with, being sucked in that device. Take it away, and then suddenly by hour 4, 5, 6, they come around. They want to play cards. They want to have a conversation. It's amazing to me what these devices are doing to our emotions as well, red and blue. And we're going to talk about on the blue side as well.
No, I completely agree with that. You've that's a
Whole nother world
whole nother world of issues and troubles and problems for sure.
I would say the other thing, Shane, is we're thinking about our past coaching experiences and people that we've engaged with. The vast majority of people who've gotten the most out of, I won't say that, not the most out of, who have really been hungry for what we're teaching are people who can't figure out how to get out of the red or the blue. And they're mired in it and they don't know what to do. And so going back to your first statement, which is discipline is what drives green. It's discipline to do the work that you got to do when you're there. Discipline to recognize when you're having the problem. Discipline to know you need to change. Discipline to add in things in your life that make you healthy, that regulate, like workouts and diets, nutrition. Discipline to own that's your behavior affecting other people, right? So, I mean, we're going to talk more about that as we talk about bridging, but it just struck me that as we talk about the people that we're trying to engage, when we instill the discipline to do the work, it tends to lessen the variability around grief.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like you just said, discipline is the pathway. Motivation will fade. And when that motivation to change, usually when you start hitting that rock bottom, you realize I need to change. You have a motivator. What happens when you start crawling out of that valley a little bit? Do you have that same discipline? That's where we see people relapse. That's where we see people fall right back in that comfortable trap, because when things start getting hard, you need a coach. You need someone to help you pull you up that mountain. You need someone to carry you part of the way. And there's no shame in that, because sometimes you can't get out of the red or the area that you're at. So completely agree with that.
Well, and I'll add, people think once they're out, once they're touching green, I don't need a coach anymore. Is that right? You don't need a coach. We all need coaches. As I said at the very beginning, you don't have to be sick to get better. Think of one professional athlete. Pick one. Any one of them that you know that's famous to you. Which one of those guys do not have 2 to 5 coaches?
Absolutely. And to your point, pick a successful business entrepreneur.
Absolutely right.
You ask them, they all have coaches, every one of them. So that's a great point. Let's move into the last emotion that we want to talk about today, which is going to be our blue zone, right? This is the depressive, withdrawn zone. Some other adjectives could be used for it. Now, me personally, this is a danger zone for me. I know that sounds silly because red's usually, considered to be dangerous, but I can go green to red and get right back out of the red. When I, like many other humans, fall into the blue is like the ocean, my friend, and it will swallow you up. If you let it, it'll swallow you, and then you're going to have all these other voices that's telling you all these things, and it's just like all these bricks just keep coming down, and you're like, I can't get out of this hole. It's a danger zone for me. It creates sadness. It brings a void in my life, and that's when you want to cope. How do I cope with this sadness? How do I cope with this? The decisions that I've made have caused me to be sad. Coping usually equates to addiction. You lean into stuff to temporarily make it go away. Alcohol, drugs. Fortunately, I never had the second part, but I would drink to cope. It would make me feel better temporarily, but then the choices I would make when I would drink would compound. So, what's some of the things, before I kind of talk about what I've done to kind of stay out of the blue, what does blue mean to you?
For me, I don't, again, I'm fortunate. I don't spend a lot of time there. There was a period of time when the kids were really young. We were living in Seattle, right? It was rainy. It was cold. We had just sold our first house. We had a condo, then we had a house in Chicago. We had to leave that right away. We moved into an apartment in cold, rainy Seattle. Kids were little. I was working a ton. Didn't get enough time at home. Didn't really love my work environment. And then I was living somewhere I didn't really love to live. And so you combine all that, and it just got tough for about 3 months. That's it. I have not had a lot of other environments. I've had a lot of bad things happen, but I am able to compartmentalize, segment those to a bad thing that happened, not a destruction of my life. I mean, when we were married young, we were not poor. We were sub poor. we were we were paying off payday loans when we could. We were bouncing paychecks to bouncing checks to buy groceries. I mean, I drove a car that was broken on its frame that I bought for $200 because that's all we had. I mean, we were poor, but I was never blue because I'm able to segment those things from what's happening to me versus who I am. And before you get into coping mechanisms, another point here: our current news cycle, our political discourse, the complete splitting of our society between red and blue in a different way is not good. And it's adding to the blue factor here because people are internalizing this every day and they're getting fed the same stuff every day through their media channels. And it's just making them more and more depressed. It's bad. It's bad. So my first coping mechanism I would recommend is disconnect from everything that feels bad. That's step one. What else you got?
No, I completely agree with that. And to segue a little bit onto that is, your past doesn't define who you are. And again, that's going to be a whole nother topic, but your past can keep you in the blue. You feel like you're not good enough to come out of it. I'm not good enough to overlook this. What are they going to say about me? At the end of the day, it doesn't define who you are. And anybody that can look you in the eyes and say they've not had mistakes and made mistakes and done things, they're lying to you. It's, the ability to cope and find the resources that you need to get out of any of these emotions, especially blue, because the blue will swallow you. So to me, I refound purpose through discipline of fitness. That was the gateway for me, like it is many others.
Tell me, to get an hour in the gym. I purposefully have a time that I leave from work every single day. You go in the morning before well, your gym is your work, but I have a time that everybody knows I'm leaving the office and I'm gone for 2 hours and I will not answer calls or texts unless it's extremely urgent. And then I plug back in. But man, that 2 hours kind of in the middle of the day, it's not, it's evening time, but it is kind of the middle of the day because I'm working late to the night most nights. That break is so healthy for me physically, yes, mentally more so. Gives me a minute to just kind of reset, think about all the inputs, and reprioritize. Didn't mean to cut you off, but I think
No. I think that's absolutely right. It's,
critically important.
one of the things is blue doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you need to reconnect. You need to find your purpose and let others help you push through that. Let's move into how we want to bridge these emotions together. Okay. So when you think about bridging the colors, what does that mean? Emotions are signals, not stop signs. I
Correct. You
thought
are
that was a
not
great
doomed to
way to put
whatever
it.
you're feeling. I love how you say that. You're not doomed to whatever you're feeling. We all feel stuff. Yeah, I'm sitting here talking like I'm a robot. I'm not a robot. I feel a lot of stuff all the time. What do I do with that? Do I allow whatever my natural reaction to be take over? I do not. I purposefully intend to choose a response. And so that's, you've talked about discipline all along the way. And discipline is, in this case, choosing a response that's appropriate for the situation versus just reacting emotionally.
And then to your point on that, every reaction causes a ripple effect, either good or bad.
That's for sure.
You can create good scenarios or you can create bad ones, but you are the puppet master of your decisions of how you want to control that emotion, whether you're right or wrong. If you can find a way to stay in that green lane, man, you're winning. You have won. You may not feel like it because you were right and they were wrong and you didn't, but you know what? At the end of the day, if you could just smile and let it be water off a duck's back, as you want to say, but you're winning, and that will help you maintain that green line. And it's hard to do. Trust me, it's easy for those words to come out of my mouth. But discipline is the key ingredient there. If you want to lead your emotions first.
No good leader is running around the red or the green. Think about start here first. Think about your least favorite leaders that you've ever had in life, Shane. Think about the people that really you did not want to work for. They were either constantly red or constantly blue, I guarantee it. Think about the leaders that you loved. Were they anything but green?
To your point there, if you was to ask anybody, name your favorite boss and your worst boss, It's green or one was in the green, one was in the red constantly.
constantly.
Completely
I had a
agree
few
with
in the
that.
blue. They're not so fun either.
So, Mike, as we get closer to putting some bows on this, finishing touches on this episode, what's some practical takeaways that someone can do to just quickly jolt themselves when they feel themselves in and out of an emotion, or just throughout the day, ask themselves, is there anything that you could say that you would recommend for somebody to do?
Yeah, man. Yeah, first, get that visual picture of what it means to have the red line, the green line, the blue line, and figure out where you are on that scale right now. So, what color am I right now? Whether you're in the middle of something or you're in the middle of the day, and evaluate back where have I been throughout the day, right? And then ask yourself once you realize you're red or blue or no, I've stayed green all day. Well, how'd you do that? What triggered it? What triggered the red? What triggered the blue? And if you are currently in that red or blue state, just a simple question. What do I need to do to get green? We're going to talk about a lot of things throughout this podcast, but we're always going to say one thing, one little question. What gets me closer to the thing and what gets me further from the thing? That's really important to you. And that's all we're talking about here.
To your point on that, what color am I now? Think back to my corporate world days. I probably should have asked myself before hitting reply all to some emails that I fired back.
Absolutely. That's the famous one. That one gets
So much so that I do now. I will read every text and every email when I know that my emotions are high. It's probably not the best time. You know how many texts I delete now that I used to would send? All the time. I'll
well,
read them
I
and
know
then
the
I'll think
best.
about it. And if I think it's still probably one I want to send, but I'm not sure, I'll let it sit in my phone and I'll walk away for some time and I'll come back to it. Still, even at that point, 9 out of 10 times I will delete it or I will drastically change it. And I'm like, God, I'm glad I did not send that. So that could be an everyday practical use that you implement even with your children.
Yes.
When you get frustrated or your coworker, your colleague, think about what you're fixing to say. Where does that road lead you? Because if it only leads to further drama and toxicity, guess what? Now you're pulling people up into the red with you. Now you're causing chaos and carnage all around versus this line. Or you could be so aggressive and mean and ugly, you cause someone that was here to go into the blue. So not only do you have impact to control your own emotions, what you do and what you say and how you behave will directly correlate with how you can present and project onto other humans.
Two totally different types of outcomes of influence. In all those scenarios you talked about, influence. You influence everything around you all the time. Choose what influence you want to have. Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?
So let's dig into some further tools that can help us. Again, just some high level things some of the things that we do that Mike and I talk about before, and we've talked a little bit about this podcast or on the podcast is one of the things I choose to do that really helps me is just guided breath work. And what is that? How does that even work? Well, there's a lot of them out there. Mike and I know we both choose to use Wim Hof is one that's really popular. It's easy to use. It's easy to download. It gives you guided breath work. It's great. Another one that I really love, Mike, is just your overall movement. If you're starting to feel a certain way, get up and walk around, take a break, go for a walk, take a clarity break, right? Clarity is going to be one of our hot topics that we talk a lot about. Is there any more that you can think of off the top of your head?
Well, I think set yourself up for success. Think about a solid morning routine that allows you to refocus on the things that occurred the day before, the things you're about to get into, and make a promise to yourself about how you're going to control your reaction to those things today. Yeah, and then I think, look, anytime we help other people, be service to others, whether that be, in your community, in your family, but just your friends. I mean, how often it's a service to somebody else if you reach out to them and tell them what they mean to you. Do that once a day. Matt, you will be surprised. Probably not the same person every day. That gets a little old. But reach out to the people that you know and tell them what they mean to you because it will change your perspective on that little bit of gratitude, whether you're out in a community helping people or whatever. It creates a completely different feeling inside.
The gratitude text is something that we believe in. We'll talk
Totally.
more about that as we get into the 4 F-bombs. But to your point, taking an extra 30 seconds to send someone a voice shot and letting you know you're thinking about them and what they mean to you, man, you talk about making somebody's day. Just little things like that can take somebody that's in the blue or red state and bring them right back out of it. So I think those are great points.
Although whenever I do that with you, you usually come back with something sarcastic.
This is very true. Very true. But I do catch myself every now and then, and I'll throw a little nugget back. Let's talk a little bit about what our mission is. Again, when it comes to things like clarity of your emotions, we want to be able to help all kinds of people, leadership teams, non-leadership teams, teams that are under the leaders, like the second row and third row frontline people, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, anybody that's hungry to grow and learn. That is what we want to do with our leadership impact team, is we want to impact those things. Mike, how's some ways we want to do that?
Well, and I'll add some more groups. Think about church groups or wine clubs or anyone who's got a group of people that are trying to level themselves up. We want to be a part of that and help you do it. So we do that through coaching. Primarily, we love in-person coaching. We got a bunch of different ways that we do that. We've got 3 different tiers. Some that are half a day, one's a full day, one's a day and a half. Day and a half, by the way, you get to do a workout with us, so that'd be a lot of fun.
That's right.
And then, man, you don't want to do Shane's workouts. I'm telling you right now. We can do short-term speaking events. We're talking about potentially pulling together some retreats as we get through this. Absolutely subscribe to our podcast. We also do one-on-one coaching, physical fitness coaching, strength coaching, and nutrition coaching. So that's another way to engage with us. And look, man, I love what Shane always says. We don't do fluff. This is, like we said, this is not just another podcast. We do fire, baby. So come and join us and let's get you lit. And Shane, how do you want to wrap it up?
No, man, I was going to say, you nailed that ending there. Red, blue, green. Emotions aren't weakness. They're simply signals. And once you learn how to understand and master those signals, you're going to be a better version of yourself. Make sure strong leaders understand that. If you can control the emotions, you control everything else. That helps you with your clarity and all those other things. So I was going to say, Mike, why don't you tell everybody where they can find us and put a big old bow on top of this episode?
Leadership Ignition Team. That's who we are. You'll find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and go to our website. That's where you'll find out about all the products and services that we provide. But on our socials, we're posting content all the time, little snippets of things that we believe in. But go to leadershipignitionteam.com, and that's where you can sign up to hear more about what we're offering from Shane and I.
Right on, man.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
We'll see you soon. See you.